Could I? Okay, I want to ask you something. I was just messaged here. Says, hi Andy. I don't know if you're aware, but Chris has some questionable positions on doxing. Um, he says that apparently you shared Ricky Vaughn's docs, and you said in a stream against Coach Red Pill on Baked's channel that you're okay with doxing of your enemies. Is this true?
Yeah, doxing is a weapon that you use against your enemies. Yeah.
Why?
Why? Well, like if you want to harm your enemies, then doxing them seems like a fantastic way to go about doing that.
What you want to actually physically hurt your enemies? You want to create a air that will have the potential of someone going to their house and hurting them.
Well, it depends on the circumstances, right? I mean, not everybody that I get in an argument with needs to have, violence levied against them, but I want there to be a very high cost for fucking with me. Yeah.
So to specify, I think that you are not an advocate of initiation of violence, but you don't reject violence as a means to reply to violence.
Yeah, I mean that's more or less it. I mean, the definition of violence can get complicated, right? Because when we're talking about politics too, all politics is the direction of organized violence, right? And so, I'm not talking about. I'm not necessarily limiting the use of force to like immediate self-defense either. And by the way, I don't think that it helps to think of doxing as an act of violence, but it is not in itself a violent act, by the way. And by the way, I didn't dox anybody. Paul Nealon doxed Ricky Vaughn, and I enthusiastically shared the information with the public after the fact.
Yeah, there's this whole thing on the internet where doxing is considered an unethical act, but it's often weird that we have to remind people doxing is not even a crime unless you do it with criminal intents further. But
I think it's a bitch move, in my opinion. I'll say if you can't battle someone with ideas and you have to go to doxing someone, you lost. Because it's like, oh, I can't argue with you on this point. You're pissing me off. Here, everyone, here's their address. Here's the phone number. It's, in my opinion, I'm very against doxing. I have many enemies of mine. I have many of their doxes. People have like emailed, look what I found. And I'm like, I don't need this. Thank you very much. And I'll erase the email. Someone actually sent me Baked Alaska's docs, his entire docs, his family. I didn't even read it. He's like, oh, look what I found. And he's like, you could do what you want with it. And I wrote, I don't need this. And I erased it. I don't need that shit. I think, Chris, I don't mean to be rude or anything, but I'm just going to say it's a bitch move, in my opinion.
Okay. I mean, that's one way of looking at it, right? I don't take it lightly to dox people, but, Ricky Vaughn was not somebody who was out there trying to win with ideas either, okay? If somebody is not, if somebody's not arguing in good faith, and the other point of this is that one of the reasons that I was so enthusiastic about the dox of Ricky Vaughn is because Ricky Vaughn was building up a database of doxing people, right? There was the whole entire point of the thing. The whole smart checker agreement that he had that he was trying to sell to Paul Nealon was using his access to, quote, unconventional databases to sell to politicians. And since he was in league with Weave, who's the technical mind between the two top Nazi sites in America, in the world, I thought that was a pretty salient detail, right? This guy's he's trying to sell access to unconventional databases and facial recognition software to far-right politicians. So that was something that I thought was worth exposing.
Jared Tim, $20 US says, Bull Gang FDR. I don't know what that means. There seems to be a lot of memes that I don't know about today on the super chat. It seems like we've entered a different universe, Andy.
Yeah, seriously.
Monster Chief, $5 US says, JF on Radical Agenda. When? Also, Ricky was going to dox people himself for profit, as Chris just pointed out. Go ahead, Andy.
No, I was just going to say, okay, like, so you're saying the reason that you're happy about it is he was creating a database that was full of people's doxes to sell.
He was selling this information. He was literally conspiring to sell this information to politicians, right? And that combined with the fact, Ricky Vaughn started off like an explicit white nationalist. He was a top-notch Twitter troll, right? And then at some point he decided to start calling people wignats. He openly confesses that he was scheming to divide the movement. And he was just creating all manner of conflict, and he was a destructive character who, by the way, I take pretty seriously people throwing Charlottesville under the bus. I've of course sacrificed a great deal for this, and as far as I'm concerned, he's disrespecting our veterans, and he's doing so from a position of anonymity. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to self-dox or that nobody can hide behind a fucking Pepe meme. But the fact of the matter is that if you're operating from a position of anonymity, then you owe a degree of deference to the people who put their real names and reputations on these things. And Ricky Vaughn didn't do that. Ricky Vaughn was constantly attacking Paul Nealon. He was attacking me. He was attacking a lot of people and a lot of different things. And he was undermining our efforts from a position of anonymity. And I think, say what you will about the ethics of it. You're a stupid fucking asshole if you attack the people who keep your secrets.
Fair enough. I mean,
we have that man $5 US. Rothbardian Circle Cubans support Cantwell, and John Gordo's $10 US. Grow a ball or pay the toll.
Also, Monster Chief for $5. JF on Radical Agenda. When
this one I read already.
Oh, you did. Okay, so yeah.
So,
sorry.
Chris, I was wondering about the role of Vice. Vice, I believe, is a left-wing organization of media. And I was wondering particularly about the role of L. Reeves in your incrimination.
Well, they're not really particularly relevant in my incrimination because nothing that they published was illegal, right? I'm a little upset with them because I want they have more video from the night of August 11th, and as far as I'm concerned, every bit of information that comes out helps me because I'm being lied about, right? But what Vice published, they made me look like a supervillain, which is kind of like what I do. So I didn't have any problem with that. It was just, that combined with the false accusations, it made for a sensational news story, which has made the case, a little bit more difficult.
When I started my YouTube career 3 years ago, I knew that I would become a villain, and I knew that I would get defamed in media. Was it the case when you started being a white nationalist, or did you just learn that it was the case?
Well, the thing is that I've sort of been a villain even when I was a libertarian, right? So I didn't become a media personality last year. I've been doing this for years, right? I ran for Congress in 2010 and stuff, right? And so I've had conflicts with especially the left wing of the libertarian movement and all this stuff, and people have been saying horrific things about me for years. And so when I started getting into demography, it sort of just naturally fit because I've sort of been like a shock jock, right? Is kind of what I've done, and getting into this subject matter, it just went pretty naturally. So when I got to Charlottesville, the way I end up talking to Vice News is Jason Kessler, the primary organizer of the event, is like, he says to me, he's like, yeah, Vice News wants to talk to me or whatever, but I don't feel like being bothered. Do you want to talk to them and you can promote your show or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so I call El Reeve and we arranged to have an interview. And, the initial vineral was not particularly eventful, but then all hell broke loose. Right. And so obviously Vice News has this, spectacular event, and they take the most shocking parts of the shock jock interview and they, combine it with these spectacular images of chaotic violence, and it makes for good TV.
I want to ask you, Jared Tim for 20 says Ricky V blamed Bull Gang for the Texas bombings. You know anything of that?
So I don't know that I don't know what all role Ricky Vaughn had to play in that. I know that Andrew Anglin said that. He said oh, these bombings that happen in Texas are obviously Atomwaff, and who else would do that? And that's like the craziest thing in the world to me. Why would you try to associate bombings with right-wing groups when you have no information about it, right? There was this whole thing that went on Gab. Like, these guys are trying to undermine Gab for some reason because they couldn't control the goddamn narrative there, right? They're like, get a block button, ban these people or whatever, and Torba refused to cave into their demands. So they started saying all these like crazy untrue things that like there's these Reed Siege Satan worshiping pipe bombers are conspiring. Like it's like the craziest nonsense I've ever heard. And they just started telling everybody, fuck Gab, go hang out on our forums where we can ban anybody who contradicts us.
Yeah. I want to answer a question here from Tavin towards me, 15 pounds. Andy, you said you were sent Baked Alaska's docs of his entire family, but you didn't read it. How did you know it was his entire family? Inquiring low IQ minds want to know. Hashtag Seaman. When I opened the email, like I saw like a Baked Alaska's like real info. His mom is like, it was like all like bolded, and then underneath was the info, and I just like I replied quickly, please don't send me this, I have no use. So I saw the email, it was just right there, but I erased it. I didn't like memorize, copy, or any of that stuff because I don't care. I legitimately don't give a shit. Me and him had some beef. I have no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't sink to that type of level, in my opinion. Yeah. So
we have Tin Man, $20, says Cantwell did nothing wrong. 1433. Jared Tim says this one you read, $7. Mike Seppi says, Jeff, can you ask Chris about the origins of his nose? And he says origins of his.
Well, I have I've published the results of my 23andMe, and it's I'm 99.7% European or whatever. It says 0.2% Middle Eastern / North African and less than 0.1% Ashkenazi. That's my 23andMe.
Sounds European. Baron Munchausen, $5, says Ricky Vaughn was just a Twitter troll with a large following. It is odd that left-wing rags now hold him up as if he was the leader of the alt-right. Adolf Funkler, $14.88 US. Smart Checker boasted facial recognition. Andy. It drops ER in the name like websites, web searcher, free starter. Chuck Johnson funds We Search R and used to fund Baked Alaska BA during the 2016 election by BA's admission. Amu $10 US says read Siege, but stay away from Satanist nonsense. Not or Not $5 US says I'm an optics cock and a Cantwell supporter. I hope Chris changes course. Can you take us through this optics meme? I see it everywhere on the internet. I don't know what that means.
So after Unite the Right, now I missed out on a lot of this because I was in jail, sadly, but everybody started panicking about optics, right? Because shockingly enough, you have the largest white supremacist gathering in decades, and the Jew media is not particularly fond of it, right? And so people start saying that this is a violent white supremacist gathering and we need the federal government to crack down on these people. It's terrorism, it's terrorism, it's terrorism, right? And all of that is lies, of course, but then some people get it in their heads that somehow you're going to have a pro-white movement that won't be demonized by the media as long as people don't wear black or something. And there was all this argumentation on the alt-right about, how we look, how we are presented by the media or whatever. And I just think that that's so completely pointless because if you're trying to save the white race, you're going to be painted as a violent hate group. There's no two ways about it.
Martin Rising, $5 US, has two questions. The first you already answered, the FBI informant question. You did provide information to the FBI, but that was as part as complaining for a crime that was committed. And he says, do you think you represent what Americans will want to follow? Carelessness is suspicious. To what extent do you think your ideas can reach the American public? Do you target a wide reach, or do you think there's going to be a minority agreeing with you, but you're fine with it and you want to live with this minority?
Well, if I was interested in mass appeal, I'd probably do things very differently than I do. I have always relied on a hardcore cadre of fanatical supporters. And I think that, at least for me, that's the way to operate, right? If you're trying to, in my estimation, people who try to appeal to the broadest possible audience end up sacrificing a lot in terms of I don't want to say integrity, but you have to be a lot more careful, right? I have thousands of people who hang on my every word and are very happy to financially support me, and I'm able to make my living as a professional podcaster with a smaller audience than most of my market competitors, because this hardcore cadre of fanatical supporters, and so I'm catering to their interests as opposed to a broader one, and I think that's sort of important to do, because the vast majority of people are never going to do anything, right? And I don't think it's reasonable to expect that most people would ever try to do anything to save the race. I mean, it's exceedingly dangerous to do this. As soon as you say, like, look, if people are acting like it's a crime to put it's okay to be white sticker places, and if you're going to talk about, we're going to, redraw the political lines and have a secessionist movement for a white ethno state, well, you're going to have a lot of stuff thrown at you that the average person is just not going to be able to deal with. And so, in my opinion, it's worthwhile to concentrate on fanatical supporters.